will come through. Braum taking off now. SLU have their options set for them. I imagine they're probably like something in to complete this bot lane. Have to keep our eyes peeled on what that may be.
It might. Interesting to see. They still don't have a bunch of information, so they're going to have to give up support here. Mostly because they don't know what the top lane pick is going to be quite yet. So if they pick top lane and they're like, okay, Viego's fine into it, then they're not going to worry about it. So they pick support instead, give that counter pick over to Shady, and MU's just like, okay, that's fine. We plan for like Viego to potentially be in the jungle as it is. We grab Jace, which is a decent blind pick, a contestable damage across the way, and it's going to be the set coming out from Shady, one of my absolute favorites, into a bunch of these melee Vanguard type supports. This champion, especially now, I have seen what is the Anathema's Chains Rush to be able to kind of amplify that CC, give some additional health into that punch. You can do some very mean things with this champion.
It's the champion to puff out your chest with. Show that you are the Chad down in the bot lane. I'm excited to see it, especially after the last performance on the Nautilus from Shady. Have to keep our eyes peeled, as over on the other side, the answer from SLU for their last pick is going to be the Aatrox into the Jace matchup.
Interesting. I've seen Aatrox pop up like once in a while, just for people who kind of were like old school Aatrox players. I didn't know Cozy was too big of a fan of this champion. In fairness, looking across from them, what do you have in terms of damage, especially like what can rip through the health bar of an Aatrox fast enough to prevent it from sustaining? There's not much. There really isn't that much. I mean, Jace is going to have like lethality and a fair amount of AD to be able to work with. You've got Misfortune, who like will have a big ultimate to be able to work with. When it comes to like big kind of percentage health damage, that's Viego. That's pretty much it. And Aatrox can absolutely kind of tear through a composition that's this squishy pretty much across the board. Especially because none of them are like super high range. I guess like Gold Card with the like rapid fire cannons can be easy to not Aatrox with, things of that sort. But especially with like a Leona on your team now, feels like this Aatrox could do some very legitimate damage to the side of Maryville.
Yeah, kind of going back to their early days here inside of this Supernova core that they have from Strumpus Cozy. I remember there was a point in time where they were locking in Aatrox and they were just flitzing it either mid or top and whatnot. So it's definitely a very interesting thing to kind of shades of that past come back, see exactly what Cozy can do in it. Because like you said, you could end some worlds. But Maryville, they got the core of what they had in the last bit. A lot of the parts that built their success inside of the last game, had to see if those parts continue to gear them towards success.
But they will. My eyes in this game for the side of Maryville are especially onto two of the biggest members. You've got, of course, the Twisted Fate, and then you've got the set as that interaction across the map that should be making as much as possible happen pretty much everywhere. On the other side, it feels so heavily, again, Leona is going to be very important, both the team fighting and some of the early presence. If you can make that happen, is now Ezreal shouldn't be under very much threat at all with a set on the opposite side. So if you end up playing that 2v2 out, it's probably easier against the Leona than it is against the not the Leona, as Ezreal can just sit further back and there's nothing you can do against the Ezreal as the set. So we'll see probably a lot of roaming if that ends up happening come out here. As well as with the LeBlanc around, there's a lot of single target damage loaded into that champion, a couple of squishy targets pretty much across the board. There's attacking that can be done here from the side of St. Louis University, as long as that Twisted Fate isn't just allowed to do as he pleases, the way we saw a little bit in the lat game, especially into the later stages, where you can just ult anywhere he wants, attack anywhere he wants, and he's not snowballing the map. LeBlanc should feel very good. Being able to pick off multiple members here on the side of Maryville should open up Strumpus to feel a lot more impactful in this one, as opposed to what was the Fizz in the previous game.
It's actually a very interesting comparison to think back to the early Destinies that came out actually from the side of Maryville in the last bit. I do want to take note of the fact that the most effective times that we get the CTF was on those TPs. Other times in the early game, those Destinies did blow sums, but didn't net kills necessarily until the mid game started rolling around. So I am curious if Strumpus is able to show a little bit more early game aggression inside of this game. What does that equate to the side of SLU? What does this do to Maryville? Does this cripple them at all? We're going to find out that answer here very shortly here, Rebel, as we're in the game for game number 2.
I think at least an answer to your question is if Twisted Fate can be responded to by the likes of Strumpus, there is a good amount of pressure that can be put now, especially with like Zaga being on a champion that's a little more early active. In the previous one, when you've got Kindred, Kindred can play into a Trundle, right? Like that's the intention of the champion. Play aggressive early, try to fight, do as you can, use that range advantage as much as possible. That's all things that should be expected of a Kindred player, right? In this one, I don't think it's as easy in the melee versus melee matchup for the Viego to just kind of like win that one-on-one setup And so my expectation is now that Zaga should be the one with his foot forward on the gas, things of that sort, pushing some of the pressure, trying to break out mid lane, trying to break out top lane as much as possible as well, trying to link up with this Leona. And so that for me is SLU's kind of identity in this one is how much does Zaga get done before all of a sudden this roaming starts coming through from Twisted Fate, before Kind Jungle really starts making an impact, before the roaming from Tsum and Shady starts impacting across the map as well.
Well, Rebel, you made a comment about something inside the last game that I want to bring up real quick. Andy heard you. He's taking cleanse on the Ezreal this time around.
Okay, good for you. It was necessary in the previous game. That was into a Nautilus. In this one, like with the gold card, with the stun coming out from Kind, especially with some of the soft CC that can come through too, I'm sure that it's useful. I don't think it's as useful in this one, but you know what? Yeah. If he was afraid about it, like
oh, Tsum. Oh, that's a lot of damage. Follow him up. Haymaker comes in.
So like. I back in the day, right? Maryville had like Niles, and you've seen Niles Gangplank and like Niles with all these other top lane champions just hip check people at level 1, right? I call it